In this video, we will be removing the hook as well as the bell crank and all the parts from the oscillating hook system, the pitman, and the feed rock shaft, all from this late model Singer 99. Let's get started. So let's talk about some of the tools that you might want to have on hand before we start. I always keep my Chapman set handy, and in cases like this, I prefer to have this extra little piece they give you with your Chapman set. It goes on the end. One side says out, one side says in, depending on how you're trying to turn the screw. I'll have it on the outside facing up. And when I get to some of those heftier screws that are a little bit tighter, instead of just trying to turn it with my hand, I can grab this. It's a little lever, gives me the leverage I need to loosen some of those tighter screws. So I'll have that. Find a 9/16 and a 3/8 wrench. You will need that for parts of the bottom end. You may need a punch and a hammer for tapping out the hook itself. Sometimes they're a little stuck. Maybe you won't need one, but I always have it around when I get to this part. And finally, this is my solution for getting out one particularly large and stubborn hinge screw or shoulder screw. Huge screwdriver, nice big box wrench. I'm making sure that one end of this box wrench fits on the end of my screwdriver. I need that for leverage, believe it or not. It works every time. An impact driver would also work, but I'm trying to keep this simple in case whoever's watching doesn't have access to some fancier tools. So those are the tools you're going to need. So even though we see the hook up here, where we need to remove it from is actually the bottom of the machine. That's where we'll spend pretty much all of our time today. Really quick, I never removed this spring here for the slide plate that comes off. So it's a friction type spring. It holds the slide plate on. There's just a little screw right here that needs to come out. This one is particularly rusty and crusty. If you watched my other 99 series for the early model 99, you know I broke the head off of this screw. So fingers crossed I don't do that again. This isn't going to do much, but maybe that penetrating oil will be my friend. And what you will find in today's video is that everything I'm doing is very, very similar to how I showed you how to do this on the early model 99. So I'm using this as my leverage here. Oh, this screw is fine. It's turning very easily. So yes, we'll just take this out real quick. Maybe you already did this step and figured it out on your own, but I didn't want to neglect it. This is just kind of glued down with gunk, but here's my little screw that holds in the friction spring. And if you find this is kind of stuck, you may be able to just kind of get in there. Did you see that? Flew up in the air. I've had so many springs fly in the air lately, I can't even tell you. But I want to clean this off, and I want to clean down in this crevice here out before I put it back. So we can set this aside. Now, everything else we're going to do is on the underside, so we can flip it over now. So where do we want to start here? Well, there are probably a couple different orders that you could do this in, but I always like to start here with the oscillating hook. This is kind of the bell crank here. I like to start by removing this little dog bone piece here. It's a linkage. And the way that it comes off is just by this one hinge screw right here. This is not screwed on. It just slips on over a little post that sticks out. But this one is. So we'll remove this first. It's just left to loosen. And I did oil these up, but if this were really stuck, I would just be using the force of my thumb and this lever here to break it free. I'm telling you, it works like a charm, and it feels really stiff because it's just so gunked up inside. So it doesn't hurt to add oil as you're working to continue to help free it up. There we go. You should be able to just pull it out. Here is our hinge screw. And now this linkage here, you should be able to just wiggle it off the post. There we go. First part on the bottom end, off, hinge screw and linkage. We'll set those aside. The next screw I want to loosen is right here. And when the linkage is on, you cannot really get to it at a very good angle. So once you take that linkage off, now we can spin it around here and I can get to it from this side and it should be a lot easier to loosen. So I'm just going to put the screwdriver in the slot and lift to loosen. Now, this screw right here, all it's doing is taking this round piece, this round part, and clamping it down. It's holding the hook in the exact place that we want it to be, so the machine is timed perfectly. When we time our hook, we'll be having this screw just slightly tight so we can spin the hook, and then once we have it perfectly timed, we'll tighten the screw down all the way and we'll hold our timing where we want it. If we take this out, it's not a hinge screw, it's just a long screw, a clamping screw. You should be able to work this part free. Might take a little bit of doing. If you're holding onto the hook, be careful, don't stab yourself. Just keep working until you get it off. So there we go. So the linkage goes on this little end right here, the screw goes in here, clamps down on the end of the hook and holds the timing in place. Let's set these aside and now we can see our hook. It spins freely. If you could not punch this out, if this was not pushing out the top, then you could add a drop of oil in here and let it soak in to help get it free, and you could punch it out. But usually if the hook is turning, this is just going to come right out the top. However, if you were stuck, you would be putting your punch on the end right here and using a hammer to tap the end and just lightly punching it out. But I can just pull the hook out through the top of the machine. And here we go. And this needs to be cleaned so very badly. Look at all this lint that's packed here and these little cutouts in the race. We want to get that nice and clean. So there's your hook. Now this next part is the part that we could do in a couple different orders. On the end of this oscillating hook connecting link pitman, very long name for a very long part, there is a screw right here that you can take out now or you can take out after we remove this screw. It really, I don't think, makes any difference. So we're going to start with getting this big one out first. This is the one that tends to be pretty stuck, and truly, if you want to try to help yourself out, there is one little oil port back in here that you can put some penetrating oil on. I don't know how much that really does to help free it up. It's a long shoulder with threads at the very end that you can see the opposite end of this screw through the top of the machine. It just takes some really good leverage. Once you find something that will work, and in this case I showed you I used a big screwdriver and a box wrench, and I put the box wrench on the end of the screwdriver and I used that to help me turn it and break it free. Once you break it free, you should be able to remove it, and don't be surprised if it's stiff. It's left to loosen, and yes, you really should try to get this part off if you can. But watch this. Look at how long the shoulder is on this screw. This is what's usually giving you the fight, the threaded part here. Because of how it's exposed in the top part of the machine, so much crud gets in there and it sort of just locks it up. But you get out this long shoulder screw here, and then see how this is all free? Now, this is the bell crank for the oscillating hook. So if we would have undone this first, this would all just come off now. But honestly, it's not a big deal to do it after. So I'm going to spin this around, and you have two screws you want to address. There's a little clamping screw right here. Loosen it at least. You don't have to take it all the way out, but loosen it a little bit. Then you can take out this screw. And it's just a tiny, stubby little screw. Set that aside. The reason why you loosen that clamping screw is so you can slide this pitman arm off. So now that I have this all off, I can further disassemble it. So there are two screws that help hold the pitman in place, the clamping screws. You see there's one right here and there's one right here. I like to take them out because if I'm going through all the trouble to clean everything on this machine, I may as well take these out and clean them too. When we go to put them back, these screws are the same on both ends. So you don't need to worry about mixing them up. They're just left to loosen. So much gunk. Set this aside. Okay. Identical. Don't need to worry about mixing them up. Now we can loosen this other screw, which they sort of look the same, but they're not. Short and stubby. This one's going to have a shoulder. So now it's going to be finding a way to grip the bell crank while I loosen this screw. There we go. See? Again, just saved the day. And she's coming free. There we go. The screw with the shoulder. So that screw holds the pitman onto the bell crank. So you should have the bell crank, the pitman, the hinge screw, 2 clamping screws, and 1 stubby little screw. Now the next part that I want to remove is this lifting arm right here. This is actually a short little part. It has a roller bar on it that is working with this feed bar right here. This is another hinge screw. There is an oil port kind of back here. If you want to drop oil in it, you can before you try to remove it, but it's just left to loosen. It's got a longer shoulder on it. And our raising bar is free and it's very gunky. I'm gonna clean this up. And this should spin freely. It could be frozen up a little bit when you first start to take your machine apart, but cleaning it and oiling it will help it to spin freely. So we can set that aside. So now we just need to take out the feed rock shaft. So how do we do that? Right here is where the feed fork is connected. We're not removing the feed fork today, but we are going to start to disassemble part of it because it will make it easier for us to get this feed rock shaft out. So what I want you to do is make sure you have your 3/8 inch wrench. And the screw that you need to pay attention to right now is right here. This is the eccentric screw for the feed fork. I'm going to hold my screwdriver in the end of that eccentric screw, and I'm going to put my 3/8 inch wrench on the end of this nut. I'm going to turn up. And it should break free. Once you get it free enough to spin off with your fingers, it should come off in your fingers. So hold on to that nut. Now, before I try to remove this eccentric screw all the way, I just think it helps to go ahead and loosen this little clamping screw right here. I'm not going to take it out yet. I'm just going to turn it just a little bit, free it up. Then I should be able to go ahead and take out this hinge screw. And what I find is when they're really gunky, you may have screwed them all the way or unscrewed them all the way free, but they're just so gunked up. Like I'm turning this, it's unscrewed all the way, but it doesn't want to come out. Sometimes the proper size punch on the end there and a little tap tap and it'll come out the rest of the way. See that is the feed fork. It just kind of fell down. We're going to leave that alone until the next video. But now we have the eccentric screw and nut that holds the feed fork in place. We're leaving this. We're going to go ahead and get the feed rock shaft out now. Set these aside. So we'll want to remove the 2 nuts here on the end that hold the pivots, the centers in place for the feed rock shaft. And I wish you could feel this. This is why I want to take it out. It's so gunked up inside. It's got a very sticky feel. It doesn't rock smoothly. I'll be taking these out and polishing them and polishing inside the ends here. It's going to just move so nice and clean. It'll just be smooth as can be. That's going to make the whole machine and the whole sewing experience so much better. So how do we do that? So breaking these free can be a little bit tricky. Might take some muscle. Put your screwdriver in the end. For this one, your 9/16 inch wrench is going to go on the nut and you're going to turn it down. And I don't have to remove this all the way now because once you get it loosened, the center should just spin out all the way, but sometimes I feel like it's easier to remove the nut all the way before the center has come out, because the nut is usually the problem. And finish twisting it off. Oh, it wants to stay on there. There we go. So do you see? The whole part fell out just because I loosened one end. These, you just have to work to get them off. We'll clean up the threads. This is what the end of the center looks like. This is what I'm going to polish out. And in the feed rock shaft, I'm going to clean out this end and polish it up as well so that all moves together without any friction. So the feed rock shaft is out. We still need to get this other center out really quick. So using my screwdriver to hold that center still, just so I can get this nut sort of turning a little bit. When we clean this, this nut is going to go on so much easier than it's coming off. There we go. So nut and second center. So let's talk about what we removed today. We took this little spring here for the needle plate off because I didn't take it off in a previous video. Then we removed this little dog bone, this linkage here with its hinge screw that holds it in place. Then we were able to unclamp the end of the hook with this screw here. We took this off and slid this little piece off here, which removed the grip on the hook, and we were able to tap the hook out of the top of the machine. So there's the hook. Then we loosened this big oscillating hook, bell crank, hinge screw. That was fun. Then we were able to take the bell crank and pitman arm off by loosening two clamping screws, this tiny little stubby screw and this other hinge screw from the end that's on the bell crank, which allowed us to get to the raising bar, which also has a big shoulder hinge screw. We quickly removed the eccentric screw and nut for the feed fork, but we left the feed fork in. So just put these together for now, and once you get the feed fork out, you can put them all together to clean them. And finally, we removed the feed rock shaft and feed bar, which was simply by loosening two nuts that held in the two centers. So these are all ready to clean. That's all the parts. When we come back, we will remove the feed regulator and feed fork from this late model Singer 99. And then we're pretty close to being ready to cleaning parts and cleaning the body of the machine. We still have electrical to go over. We will get to that for sure, but that's what we can expect in the next video. Thank you so much everyone for watching. I appreciate your patience as I work to get these videos out. If you like this series, please take a moment to like the video, subscribe, follow along with me. I look forward to seeing you all again very soon. Bye.